Me, I'm just someone that's in love with life, and I like people. Live, it's one thing in translation, but you can't hear an interpreter.
Jimmy Reid, shop stewards convener and communist councillor, is as much a part of Clydeside shipbuilding as the yards themselves. Spokesman for the workers, in 1971 he gained national recognition, urging the men to take over the yards and work on in the face of threatened closures. The work-in achieved the desired aim, the yards remained open, Reid's combined skills as a natural orator and shrewd negotiator contributing much to the success.
If the young couple involved are going to pay back the money, it's them that are paying in the last analysis.
In the political arena, he's been less successful. Although he sits on Clydebank Council, 4 attempts as a communist candidate for Parliament have failed. But still it's here, among the people whom he loves, he chooses to live, hoping that eventually he can win their political support. As well defined as his political views are his likes and dislikes in everyday life.
And I do believe that the great thing that stamps man out from all other animals, if you like, and I don't think man is an animal, is this great desire to communicate. And man must communicate. And you've got to say it in a certain human way. It's got to be analytical, it's got to be logical, but it's got to, if you like, have compassion. It's got to have something that establishes your common humanity. And it's got to have humour. I mean, life without humour is an impossible prospect. Tommy Cooper makes me laugh. I love the early Hancock. Johnny Spade's scripts for Till Death Us Do Part, I think. Classic example of humour, where people are sitting down all over Britain and laughing at Alf Garnett each week. And they're laughing at themselves in many instances. The type of humour that Spade is projecting is also socially useful.
Enoch is wrong in having a go at the coons.
Oh!
Well, he ain't seen the real danger. He ain't seen the real danger, has he? Not from your coons, I mean. Don't want them over here, stinking the country out with a bloody curry and... playing on my dustbin lids all night long, but they're not the real thing. It's your Russian unions and your Chinese takeaways. Op-eds of fifth column activity, they are. We're on to them, don't you worry about that. We're on to them, mate. Next time one of them commie shop stewards goes inside the nick, he'll bloody well rot there. They only pull them out on strike so they can get on the television. I blame... it's a fact. It's not stupid at all. I blame the BBC for that.
I'm very much a Will Fife man. I think he was a comedian, but a creative artist. His songs, his I Belong to Glasgow, it's not something that's sung only by drunken Scots celebrating a victory over England at Wembley. It's full of social comment as well. Fife is the giant of the Scottish musical.
Let me see now. How old will my boys be now? My oldest boy, that'll be... Who's the oldest one now? That'll be Donald. Aye, Donald, he's 72. He's turning out a bit of a nut. I'll bet you, Bob, you'll hardly believe what I'm going to tell you, but that boy didn't land home till very nearly 9:30 last night. I'm 94 this morning, I am 94 today. And I'm not so young as I used to be, I'm getting old and grey. But my heart is young and I'm fond of fun and I'm very proud to say I'm getting married on Thursday, though I'm 94 today.
I'm very much an admirer and fan of Will Fife. On the other hand, I don't like Harry Lauder's records. He's a sort of caricature of the Scots. He projected a stage image of the Scot. You know, really, I get sick of it myself. You know, porridge in your spawn and a caber up your kilt, maar off the ochter mocht in the morning. It's a broad brug, moonlight, nicht and nicht. Nobody speaks like that in Scotland. It's for the titillation of a sort of West End London audience. No. Although people that saw Lauder at his zenith of his career say he had a great stage personality, I don't know, he just doesn't communicate with me. I'm rather resentful of the image he projects.
Does music have any place in your life at all?
Yes. Two forms of music that I constantly go back to for real satisfaction is jazz, and a term I don't like, classical music. And I spent my 2 years national service, although I had a trade in the RAF, most of it playing in the RAF band. And I enjoyed it. To this day, of course, I've still got a feeling for silver band, brass band music. It's lovely even to make music. I think more people should be encouraged. Here in Clydebank we've got 2 choirs, we've got a silver band. Unless someone is tone deaf, I think they've got a capacity to make music together with fellow human beings. They may not become great musicians. In fact, a lot of them won't. But there's an enjoyment in making music together.
Could you pick one special jazz recording that has significance for you?
Yes, it's Charlie Parker, quite frankly. The Bird, as they called him. Charlie Parker was a brilliant, creative musician. There's one record I heard, Loverman, and it almost made me weep. It really is a man tearing his feelings, really from his guts. This sense of alienation, and yet he wanted to communicate. If you go to an urban city and people hear jazz, over a period of time they respond to it because it's something which matches up, with their experience in life. It's got a beat, it's got creativity. I reckon it's the one form of music which could justifiably be called an urban folk music. It's a cry for help from a fellow human being, engulfed by a society that's indifferent, that's been cruel, that's ruthless to him. I can identify with that feeling. Not that I went through the experiences of Parker, but that so many human beings have. He was sick, and yet he wanted to communicate. He made a better recording of it when he recovered, but I always feel that this is a tender interpretation of this standard. I really was quite moved the first time I heard it. There's no difficulty in reconciling a love of Beethoven, classical music, the best of jazz. It's all got its origins in a common humanity. First time I heard Wagner, I was astounded, again the brass, Tannhäuser and that. I said, this is great, wonderful stuff this. I still like Wagner and many others, but for me, Beethoven, He's got the emotional intensity of Wagner. Somehow or other he's got a way of organising the music and developing the themes, which is technical, but which is the hallmark of a genius, because you don't notice the technique in the evolution and development of the theme. I like his ninth, of course, and I say of course because most other people tend to like it as well. And it conjures up in my mind the occasions in which there's been some struggle that you've been involved in, along with your fellow workers, fellow tenants, fellow citizens, and all these occasions in which you've been marching or demonstrating along with others. In a visual sense, I remember seeing a film some time ago, and I don't go to the cinema often, I mean very infrequently. It was Viva Zapata. There's this part where Zapata is arrested by the Federales, and they put a rope round his neck, Brando's Zapata, and his hands are tied behind his back. The Federales are on their horses and he's sort of trudging behind them. And the peasants who had been driven to desperation, half a dozen of them just come and they walk beside Zapata. There's not a word spoken. Then more and more of the peons come, big hats, rifles, and this white tunic they wear, and they just start congregating, marching along in unison, walking along beside him. Well, I think this is what it means. That's why it appeals to me. In the end of it, of course, the Federales got to pack it in. You see, the ordinary people, as they would use the word, they've asserted themselves and they were impotent. And they've engulfed them in people. They eventually have to take the rope off Zapata and release him. Not a word spoken, just this visual image of people working in concert. That's what it means to me. I think that's what Beethoven had in mind.
What is it about football that appeals to you?
Got to be the game for me. I think it played at its best. Football is what life's all about. Sort of as an analogy, at any rate, to life. A good football team encourages individual expression within a collective team effort. In 1953, they were televising the England-Hungary match. In my opinion, that represented a quality of change in football. The Hungarians at that time, Puskás, the great midfield player, Hidikuti lay deep, the centre forward, and Kocis, Bozic, I can't pronounce their names, they're Hungarians. First time England had been beat at Wembley, that was not its significance to me. You know, I've got to say that. The significance was I was watching football with a new dimension, a natural flair and ability allied to a tactical structure that almost amounted to an art form. And I think all that's good in football since then has been to some extent an emulation or development of the new departure of the Hungarians in the early 50s.
Do you have a favourite place at all?
Home. Scotland must be among, the top dozen most beautiful places in the world. All sorts of places you would like to stay in, they would all be in Scotland. I think it was Scott that wrote the poem, lives there the man with soul so dead, who never to himself hath said, this is my own, my native land. So I've got this affinity with Scotland, but particularly the West Coast. I particularly like the tip of the Mull of Kintyre. I've spent some happy holidays down there. There's an attraction about the sea. I must say, there's an attraction about boats. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe we are an island race. I would love to tinker about boats. I like going out in a boat. The sea's lovely. Even sometimes when you're on a rugged coastline, you're sitting there with a cigarette, reading. It's also soothing, the tide coming in and out, and the white horses, as we call them, breaking over the rocks. All these things are enjoyable. They're all part of life. What I do like is living in the edge of the Glasgow conurbation in Clydebank, an identifiable community. And some people come, honestly, particularly from south of the border, all they can see in Glasgow is slums. It's the most warm-hearted place I've been in my life. The people may not have a veneer of sophistication, but they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful, honest, warm-hearted, and so on. And the sheer pleasure of living among such people, and then having on your doorstep Loch Lomond. I mean, 20 minutes from here, I'm in Loch Lomond. I would love a boat in Loch. Come home, nice night, way down to the Loch. You'd be able to sail there all night, spend weekends there. It'd be lovely, That's the only thing. I don't mean anything pretentious. Little sort of cabin cruiser. It'd be lovely. Away from everything there, you're out in the Loch, all the islands there. It's panoramic beauty. Then Lomond rising right from the Loch. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
Are you materialistic at all? Do you aspire towards possessions?
Not at all. Certain areas, books, I like good records and that. I've got a great pet hate, and that's someone that you loan a book to and doesn't return it. So the only thing I'm sort of possessive about is about books.
Do you read a lot?
Yes. I became a voracious reader at fairly early age. I very early read Shaw. I read everything that Shaw wrote by what time I was 15, and to this day I love Shaw. Great dramatist, great writer, intellectually brilliant, heart and soul, concerned about humanity, had a warmth, had a compassion that shone in his eyes, but in his writings as well, and a great conversationalist. Shaw would not sacrifice a point to coin an epigram, as Wilde would do. He would be witty, but he wouldn't sacrifice anything for the point of being witty. I don't like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, praise silence for Mr. George Bernard Shaw, speaking at the Joint British Committee Authors' Day dinner in London in honour of Professor Einstein.
If you take the typical great man of our historic epoch, and suppose that I had to rise here tonight to propose the toast of Napoleon, well, undoubtedly I could say many very flattering things about Napoleon. But the one thing which I should not be able to say about him would be perhaps the most important thing. And that was that it would perhaps have been better for the human race if he had never been born.
But you know, the thing which really bugs me, we should all sue the educational system in Britain. Because there's millions of people that have been put off, for example, Shakespeare, by the educational system. I literally stumbled on Shakespeare. I'd read some comment from Shakespeare, and I got the book out of the library and read up this beautiful statement. And I'll tell you what it was again. I had somebody saying the quality of mercy is not strained. Yeah? So that's beautiful, beautiful sentiment, that. You then you read other things. There are sentiments, there are things in almost every Shakespeare play that really jump out like pure gold nugget.
He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what's his reason? I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions? Fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge?
Is there a person, either historical or contemporary, whom you admire and respect?
And I think the person that I really was tremendously impressed by was Paul Robeson. Joan and I were at a reception in London when Paul had got his passport back and had come back to England. I'm not going to it just now, but I had rendered some service to Paul Robeson Jr. Helped him in a certain difficulty he had. And at this reception, there were a lot of people, and some of them were quite frankly sycophantic. They're all around Paul and so on. Joan and I with some friends quite some distance away, and suddenly the big man moves across, comes up to me and says, "Are you Jimmy Reid?" I mean, that voice was magnificent. You thought I looked up, I was about 6'4". I said, yeah. I want to thank you for helping young Paul. And there was this face. He was one of the most beautiful men I've ever met. Eyes that were full of humanity. He was an intellectual of the best kind, totally identified with his people. An artist. I mean, his interpretation of Othello. And I think it did more for the Negroes in the 1930s and 40s than anyone else. He was a great musicologist, of course. I heard him doing a concert, singing a Hebridean song and then a Chinese song. The same harmonic structure, the same rhythm, and he was always arguing about the universality of music.
Хорошие ребята, жизнь по-своему переделают, людьми станут настоящими людьми. Готовы на горе, готовы на муки, готовы на смертный бой.
And when I think of Paul Robeson, and I think of these CDW persons who talk about niggers, you can imagine them, nothing to offer by and large. You think of Paul Robeson. I don't have to get involved in a deep, profound argument about racism. I've just got to think of Paul Robeson and say what nonsense it is to judge a man by the colour of his skin. He was to me, he impressed me because he was an all-round human being. This is what people should be after. Be interested in all human activity. Because the great thing about man is he's got this potentiality to render everything he does beautiful.
Do you have a favourite moment in your life?
Well, it's always difficult to I suppose the day in which I was installed as rector of Glasgow University, I was so busy that I could only write the speech the day before, and I was anxious to do well, not for myself, but because I was a worker that had been elected rector, and there was some big figures from the establishment, both present and in the past, had been previous rectors, and I didn't want to do anything which would say, well, look what happens when you have a worker elected rector. What kind of rectorial address was that?
The theme of my address today is alienation. And let me right at the outset define what I mean by alienation. It's the cry of men who feel themselves the victims of blind economic forces beyond their control. It's the frustration of the great mass of ordinary people excluded from the processes of decision-making. It's the feeling of despair and hopelessness that pervades people who feel with every justification that they have no real say in shaping or determining their own destinies.
After I started, I forgot again all about self. I wasn't conscious, I wasn't nervous in the sense of what are these people thinking of me. By that time I had been committed to saying what I wanted to say.
If automation and technology is accompanied as it must be with full employment, then the leisure time available to man will be enormously increased. This being so, then our whole concept of education must change. The object must be to equip and educate people for life, not for work, solely for work or a profession.
But really, it was a realisation after the speech, actually. I got a standing ovation and things like that. And the press stood when they tell me that's unprecedented. And I then, shortly afterwards, began to get some inkling of the very high estimate of the address. And that was important, not to me, but to the people to whom I belong.
What would you like your epitaph to be?
Well, it's not poetry. It's something and a sentiment I've often thought about, and I've heard it for many, many years. And it's the following. Man's dearest possession is life, and since it is given to him to live but once, he must so live as to feel no torturing regrets for years without purpose. So live as not to be seared with the shame of a cowardly and trivial past. So live that dying he can say, all my life and all my strength was given to the finest cause in the world, the liberation of mankind. That embodies, for me, and it's a very generalised context, the ingredients of what I would like to have read over me when I die. I then would think, well, I wouldn't be thinking then maybe, but I would at least then recognise that my life had been worthwhile.
Build the road of peace before us, build it wide and deep and long. Speed the slow and check the eager, help the weak and keep the strong. None shall push aside another, none shall let another fall. March beside me, oh my brothers, all for one and one for